Now on BBC One, the lunchtime news on this New Year's Day with Sean Lay.
Good afternoon. Pope Francis has addressed the thousands of people who gathered at St. Peter's Square in the Vatican a day after the death of Benedict XVI. The Pope described his predecessor as a faithful servant of the gospel and the Church. Our religion editor Ali Maqbool is at the Vatican now.
Yes, we heard from Pope Francis a couple of times today. First at a Mass for Peace that was held in St. Peter's Basilica behind me. He talked about entrusting our beloved Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI to the Holy Mother to accompany him from this world to God. And then later, Pope Francis appeared at a balcony here at the Vatican for what is his regular Sunday lunchtime homily, where he started this week by asking people to join together, as you rightly say, to pray for that a man he called a faithful servant to the gospel and to the Church. Extraordinary scenes, though. We saw thousands of people pour into this square from every side. Vatican police told us a short while ago they thought around 40,000 people were here to witness that homily. A lot of people, of course, happened to be in Rome for New Year's from around the world, including a man I met from Chicago who said, in spite of the fact that he knew that Pope Benedict had been ill for some time, there was still a sense of shock. Others did refer to the complicated legacy of Pope Benedict. But of course, many more people will pour into Rome and the Vatican in the coming days, first for the laying in state, and then, of course, for the funeral on Thursday morning that will be presided over by Pope Francis.
Aleem, thank you very much. 2023 has arrived all over the world by now. In cities across the UK, large crowds greeted the new year. In London, the chimes of Big Ben were followed by a tribute to Queen Elizabeth. In Edinburgh, revellers enjoyed the first full Hogmanay celebrations in 3 years. Sancha Berg's report on the global celebrations does contain flashing images.
For 2023, New Year celebrations are back around the world. In New York, partygoers in Times Square relished the moment. Thousands squashed together, only a handful wearing masks. In London, thousands filled the banks of the Thames, relieved after COVID and a difficult 2022.
Happy New Year, and hopefully this year is better than last year, hopefully.
After the year we've had, it is phenomenal.
Years we've had.
No, but the year we've had in general, like with the cost of living, the inflation, the politics of the country, it's just been upheaval. It's the one time we all come together.
This is London.
The fireworks welcomed in the new year and marked the losses of the old.
I declare before you all that my whole life, whether it be long or short, shall be devoted to your service.
In Edinburgh, the first Hogmanay events in 3 years were sold out across the city, despite rain and freezing temperatures. And in Paris, crowds filled the Champs-Élysées for the fireworks. Local media estimated 1 million people came to cheer in 2023. There were smiling crowds too in the Chinese city of Wuhan, where the pandemic began nearly 3 years ago and where COVID is back. The Chinese authorities say the situation is under control, but several countries, including the UK, are bringing back COVID tests for travellers from China. Sancha Berg, BBC News.
And in London, the New Year's Day parade is in full swing. Our reporter Nick Johnson is there.
Sean, this event was devised back in 1986 as a way of sweeping away those Christmas cobwebs and bringing some noise and festive cheer to the streets of London. It's certainly doing that. We've had around 8,000 people pass by us here, groups from around the world. We've had a Bhangra group from Hounslow in London, and we've had a group from El Salvador in Central America. I actually spoke to that group from El Salvador, and they said their young people within that group actually had to raise money themselves to make the journey here to perform. Now, this is the first COVID-free restriction New Year's Day parade event in London since January 2020. And organisers here say that around 500,000 people are lining the streets to watch, but it's also very much a global event, and around 500 million people will be tuning into their TV sets to watch around the world.
And enjoy the show, Nick. Thanks very much. Now, in his New Year message, the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, has described the social care system as broken. Residential homes are struggling to deal with rising costs. Archbishop Welby said, as well as experiencing a shortage of carers. The government has said it's providing £7.5 billion to support the sector over the next 2 years. The Archbishop will publish a report on social care later this month. There have been more missile and drone attacks on Ukrainian cities overnight, including in the capital. Our Ukraine correspondent Hugo Bechega is in Kyiv for us. Hugo, a sombre start to the new year.
Yeah, Sean, and Ukrainians are angry and tired of those attacks, which have hit places like Kyiv, away from the front lines. Last night, the air raid alert sounded after midnight. There were loud explosions here in Kyiv, but no casualties. And that happened hours after Russia launched missiles targeting cities across the country. One person was killed here in Kyiv. And the authorities accused Russia of deliberately targeting civilians by launching attacks as people had gathered to celebrate the New Year. Also last night, we heard from President Zelensky, who delivered an emotional New Year's speech. He praised Ukrainians for resisting the Russian aggression and said his country had no option other than fight until victory. But in Russia, there was a very different tone in President Putin's New Year's speech. He was surrounded by soldiers and indicated that the war would continue.
Hugo, thank you very much. People across the world are being invited to share an anniversary sing-along of Amazing Grace. John Newton wrote the words for the New Year's Day service celebrated at a small church in Buckinghamshire in 1773. The familiar tune was composed later, as Harry Farley reports.
In Milton Keynes, a church choir is rehearsing one of the most popular hymns of the last 200 years.
I first heard it in Gikuyu, in my language, and it's a song of redemption, a song that says anybody can come as they are, that God loves me regardless, and the way it comes out through in my language is just like, I feel special.
Amazing Grace became an anthem of the civil rights movement. In 2015, former President Obama used it for his speech at the funeral of the Reverend Clementa Pinckney, who was shot in a racially motivated attack in Charleston.
Amazing Grace.
It was here at this church in Buckinghamshire that John Newton wrote the words to Amazing Grace for his New Year's Day service in 1773. Before joining the priesthood, Newton was notorious as the captain of several slave ships. In barbaric conditions, he transported people from West Africa to be sold in the Caribbean before he had what he said was a dramatic conversion.
For some at the local museum in Olney, Newton's background as a slave trader hangs over this anniversary.
I know that my great-grandmother was an enslaved person, taken out of Africa and taken down to Guyana. This was what my ancestors had to go through in order to build a colony somewhere in some other country. It saddens me and it fills me with a tremendous amount of grief and remorse.
250 years on, this hymn's themes of forgiveness and grace are as challenging as ever. Harry Farley, BBC News.
One of the original members of the group, the Pointer Sisters, Anita Pointer, has died. The singers were known for hits including Jump and Automatic, both of which won Grammys, and I'm so excited. Anita Pointer, who's died at the age of 74. She had been living with cancer. You can see all on today's stories throughout the afternoon on the BBC News channel. The next news here on BBC One is at 6:05. Have a good afternoon.